Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. This episode of CD Junkie is part 2 of a 2-part series focusing on the band The Cars. This episode is going to focus on the solo albums by each of the members. Now, I can tell you right now that Greg Hawkes, the keyboard player, he put out an album, I think, in '83, and then an EP after that. Those have not been available on CD yet. So I anxiously await their arrival. I hope they come out one day, but they're really nice instrumental albums, but you can only get them on vinyl, so I can't discuss them on an episode of CD Junkie. But I can encourage you to purchase them if they ever come out on CD or if you see them out in the wild on vinyl. Definitely worth your while. One thing before I get into this catalog here, it's a short stack, so I should be through it pretty quick. The Cars was definitely a band that was made up of this great chemistry of these 5 band members. You know, I used to read a lot or hear from friends like, oh yeah, RIC OCASEK just tells Ben Orr and Elliot Easton and Greg Hawkes and David Robinson what to play, and they play it, and they don't add their own personality to it. That's BS. I can assure you that. I mean, RIC OCASEK has put out some great solo albums, but they're missing that Cars element. They're missing, Elliot Easton's great guitar work. They're missing Ben Orr's vocals. I mean, Greg Hawkes does appear on most, if not all, of RIC OCASEK's solo albums. But really, the Cars itself is just an amazing band. Almost everything I'm going to talk about here is great, but it's not the Cars. So, go into listening to these with an open mind, because what you're going to find is something truly delightful and truly wonderful, because all of these people were talented. But as I said, the Cars really, all of them together, really made that sound. So we're going to start off with the first of the Cars members that released a solo album, and that's RIC OCASEK. His debut solo album was called Beatitude, and that came out in 1982. And this really has a lot of cool stuff on it. It's very experimental, very keyboard oriented. And you can tell he was influenced by groups like Suicide and, sort of the more underground stuff. I mean, he's not just putting out 80s pop. I mean, he's really traveling down different avenues and experimenting outside of the format of the Cars. Now, this is the version that Rubellin Remasters released, and it's got bonus tracks. Now, the album features like Jules Shear and Stephen Haag, or Haig, I don't know how you pronounce his name, from, both of them from Jules and the Polar Bears. And it also features Stephen George, who was in Ministry, and Greg Hawkes is on the album. And you can see there that it has bonus tracks. It's a really wonderfully eclectic album, really nice. You should definitely check this out. His next solo album came out in 1986. And this was sort of in between Heartbeat City and Door to Door. So this is just a really great pop album. I mean, Tom Verlaine's on the album. Elliot Easton plays on it. Greg Hawkes is on it. Ben Orr is on it. Chris Hughes from Adam and the Ants, and a really famous producer, he played on it. Tony Levin's on the album. Roland Orzabal from Tears for Fears is on it. G.E. Smith is on it. This album sounds closer to the Cars than any of his other solo albums. Maybe it's because some of the members helped him out on it. He actually had a hit with like Emotion in Motion, and it's a really wonderful album. It is called This Side of Paradise. Came out in 1986. Now, it took another 5 years. This is 3 years after the Cars officially broke up. And out comes the album Fireball Zone. There's some pretty darn good songs on the album, but overall, I don't know if it was him or his label, but I mean, Nile Rodgers is on the album. They try to funk him up a little bit. They have like female backing vocalists, and it just doesn't work, for me at least. It almost sounds a little awkward. Like I said, some really good songs on it, but they can be sometimes ruined by that sort of funkified late 80s, early 90s production. It's not an album that I hate. It's just probably my least favorite RIC OCASEK solo album. His next album, called Quick Change World, this came out in 1993. Now, there was a European-only album called Negative Theater, and it was part RIC OCASEK pop and part experimental. The record label in the US said they're not going to release that album as is. So they made him take off most of the experimental stuff and put poppier songs on it. and that's what we got here in the US. I don't have a copy of Negative Theater. I would love to find it eventually, but this is what we've got, and it's got some really, really good songs on it. Greg Hawkes is on this. This is sort of back to RIC OCASEK alternative pop. It's not really that experimental. There are moments on this. You know, they removed most of them, but some really, really good songs on it. So I definitely recommend this one if you stumble across it. His next album was 1997, and that's called Troublizing. Now, this album, it features Melissa Oftermar from Hole and Billy Corgan and Greg Hawkes. And Billy Corgan is on maybe half the album, maybe a little bit more than that. I think he might even produce a couple tracks or at least co-produce. And it's like a tougher, I don't want to say it sounds like Smashing Pumpkins, but it's more alternative rock, but it's got that classic RIC OCASEK songwriting style and that voice. And, you know, again, it doesn't sound like the Cars. It sounds like solo RIC OCASEK. Not really experimental. Lots of just great rock and pop songs. And Troublizing, that came out in 1997. Now, it took another 8 years before he put out the album called Nexterday. And that came out in 2005. And this, of course, has Greg Hawkes. It even has Stephen George from the first Ministry album. He also played on the first RIC OCASEK solo album. This is a far more intimate album. It's still that classic RIC OCASEK songwriting style. It's that voice, but it's not overproduced. I think most of it is performed by him in his home studio. Lots of really, really, really good songs on it. And this is his last solo album. Now, RIC OCASEK passed away in 2019. But again, RIC OCASEK solo albums are solo albums. They don't feel or sound like Cars albums. And that's the way that I actually prefer it. Now let's get into Benjamin Orr. Of course, he sang Drive and Let's Go and Bye Bye Love and so many great songs by the Cars. He didn't really write them, but he was right up front singing with RIC OCASEK. He only put out one solo album, and that is called The Lace. That came out in 1986. Now, this is just a slick pop album. It does have sort of a feeling of the Cars on it. I mean, ELLIOT Easton, I think, plays on something on this album, but it's more slick than the Cars. And the songs were written by him and his then girlfriend, fiance, Diane Page. It's just an album of great little pop songs. And his voice, I mean, Benjamin Orr is such a great vocalist. Stay the Night was a hit. Too Hot to Stop should have been a hit. Hold On should have been a hit. A lot of songs on here. It's a very, very solid album, but it's the only one he released. And unfortunately, Benjamin Orr passed away in the year 2000. And I just wish that there was more out there by him as well. Great, great talent, just like his former bandmate, RIC OCASEK. Now, let's get into Mr. ELLIOT Easton. Now, this album came out in 1985. This came out on CD. And I think maybe Rhino or somebody put it out, and then it went out of print. Then Wounded Bird reissued it on CD, and that went out of print, but now it's been repressed. So you can get this now. It's back on the market. You don't have to pay your $75 or $100 for it. It's now a more reasonable price. Definitely check it out. This is an album. It's more eclectic than I expected. You know, you've got some, great sort of alternative rock sounding songs. Then you've got this great power pop song called Shayla, one of the greatest power pop songs of the mid 80s. Just, it's wonderful. And, and he's got a couple blues songs on there. And there's a song or two that I'm not really fond of on the album. But overall, he wasn't known for being a lead vocalist in the Cars, of course. He was known for being their lead guitar player. And boy, he handles it very well on this album. It's really fantastic. This album actually is produced by Stephen Haag. God, how am I ever going to figure out how to pronounce that guy's name? And Jules Shear co-writes, and he's on there. And you can really tell Jules Shear's influence on this, because Jules Shear is an amazing artist in his own right. But ELLIOT Easton, and this is the version that has bonus tracks. And Stan Lynch and Benmont Tench from The Heartbreakers appear on that. I think like the band on these bonus tracks is like Band of Angels or something. And Elliot Easton didn't sing lead on those songs, but he handles the other ones up here. And like I said, you can hear Jules Shear in there as well. And that's always a treat. So Elliot Easton, the album is called Change, No Change. Came out in 1985. Really, it's back in print and you have to check it out. The Wounded Bird Records label never lets me down. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, it isn't really a solo album by a member of the Cars, but it features a couple members of the Cars, and that is the New Cars. And this was a band, short-lived, maybe a year or two, but Elliot Easton and Greg Hawkes from the Cars, they put this band together, and it features Todd Rundgren and Chasm Sultan from Utopia, plus a drummer by the name of Prairie Prince, who's played on a bunch of records. So this is them. It's essentially mostly live, and it's them doing mostly Cars songs. And there are a couple Todd Rundgren songs thrown into that live mix, including I Saw the Light. And then there's 3 new studio tracks that were written by Elliot Easton, Greg Hawkes, and Todd Rundgren. And it's a good record, but I'll tell you, it sounds more like Utopia, the new material, because Utopia was Todd Rundgren, Chasm Sultan, Willie Wilcox, and Roger Powell. So you've got half of that band, and with Todd Rundgren handling lead vocals and Chasm Sultan up there, it sounds like sort of an early 80s version of Utopia, the pop era. But it's a fun album. I'm not into live stuff, but I had to get it because it has 3 new studio tracks on it. So if you're a Cars fan, definitely add this to your collection. And that is it. I don't have anything else here in this little stack of CDs, but what I do have right ahead is a medley that I put together featuring snippets from a few songs from each of these albums that I just talked about. So why don't you sit back, relax, give this a listen, and I will see you on the other side.
Hey Jimmy, they're calling you back. They want you to come back and take out the garbage. They want to talk to you about something.
What would you but not tonight. I could make some calls, but please keep me warm. Please come and keep me warm. Please keep me warm, oh baby. Come and keep me warm.
That's it. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope this inspires you to check out some of the solo releases by the members of the Cars. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me, I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.